Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Autism has rightfully been getting lots of media airtime lately. Indeed, it is a deeply misunderstood condition, and sadly, 85% of autistic adults are unemployed. As you'll hear in this episode and in my 2020 episode with Dr. Temple Grandin, neurodiversity can help teams thrive, and people on the autism spectrum often have a lot to bring to the table at the workplace. In fact, they may bring super strengths that could be akin to what my guest describes as the Autistic Advantage. My guest, Olivia Fox-Cabane, is the author of a huge best-selling book, The Charisma Myth: How Anyone Can Master the Art and Science of Personal Magnetism. I love this book and have given it out to countless people I serve. Yet, you'll hear the personal story of why Olivia wrote the book and how, as an undiagnosed person on the autism spectrum, the publicity tours associated with the success of that book were excruciating to her. You'll also hear about how the diagnosis has been badly misunderstood, how many treatment modalities have actually been harmful, even extremely harmful, to people on the spectrum, and some things people need to know to better understand members in our community who are autistic. She even shares the cross-cultural aspects of being in a relationship with a neurotypical husband and some benefits of being in a neurodiverse relationship. So listen in as Olivia and I talk about the Autistic Advantage. Please note, some of the descriptors of treatment modalities on this episode are graphic and violent in nature. Also, adult language is definitely used in this episode. Please listen accordingly. Olivia Fox-Cabane, I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. Welcome to Super Psyched.
Hi, Olivia Fox is just fine, I promise.
But it's so good to see you. I have been a fan of yours since forever it feels, but in 2014, my very favorite read, and I read a lot, well over a book a week, yours came at the top by years, and The Charisma Myth. It's one of my most frequently given out books, and I'm so glad that you have decided to share your story through this podcast that you've created called The Autistic Advantage. It's time somebody like you gave voice to that. And yeah, let's just get into the backstory. When did you realize that you were probably on the spectrum?
I didn't, ironically. The hilarious thing is that I was told by my mother a couple of years before she died, so I was already in my 40s, that I had actually been diagnosed at age 7. And when I told this to my Silicon Valley friends, their reaction was, "You mean you didn't know?" Because apparently to them, it was so bloody obvious that I was autistic up to my eyebrows that they assumed that I knew and just didn't bring it up. So in my 40s is when I find out, but apparently age 7-ish is when I was diagnosed.
Wow. So this is rather recent.
It is. And like so many other women who were diagnosed late, my reaction was all of a sudden, my whole life makes sense.
So it sounds like it was my whole life makes sense. And I'm wondering if there are various reactions to this recognition of the diagnosis itself, maybe something akin to various stages of what, like, wow, this is true for me. Were there stages for you?
I know some people go through the stages of grief. I didn't. For me, it really was just the relief. Oh my God, turns out I'm not an alien as I had assumed for the longest time. And my environment told me there is relief was really it. Relief, excitement. Yes. And of course, for my environment, the slight downside is that gave me only more permission to be my fully autistic self. So I may have swung the pendulum slightly too far direction of celebrating my difference. But it's been a lot of fun for me, at least.
Come on, take me to a celebration. What are some of the things where you may have taken it too far? Let's share that with the audience.
I will send you a photo of my car. Our car, which I have painted in glow-in-the-dark colors because I'm not in cars and I can't recognize them. But now that mine is painted glow in the dark, impressionist blue and green, I can spot it in any parking lot. So that's just one.
That is amazing. And how, in your definition, does that conform with autism?
Well, the principle underlying a healthy approach to autism, from what a lot of autistics say, is when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Autism is a spectrum and it manifests so differently in every person. The best description for me that I found is seeing it as spiky profiles with, in my case, a very, very spiky profile of I am exceptionally good at an exceptionally small number of things and completely useless at almost everything else. It's an interesting life.
So let's hear how you rock your freak flag in terms of your own spiky profile. Let's just hear a little bit more about how you have an individualized version on that spectrum that somehow, in your view, may correspond with the Autistic Advantage itself.
That is a beautiful way of phrasing it. Let me acknowledge first that I come from a position of not just towering, but overwhelming privilege. I've got a white skin. I've got an American passport. At this stage, I've got more money than I know what to do with, connections, you name it. So I'm in a position where I can fly every freak flag in the world without any possible downsides or dangers. And that's something that very few people have. And I try to be appreciated for it. But at this stage, frankly, the quickest way to say it is I just don't give a fuck, because I don't want more clients. I'm not going to turn down more money, but God, I don't want more money. The last thing I want is more attention from the press. So I can really do what I want, truly not give a fuck about, well, anything really. That's an incredible freedom. That is the greatest privilege anyone can have.
Could not agree more. What a great freedom. What a great privilege. I mean, thinking of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah, you've climbed. Congratulations.
I was already born pretty damn close.
You were born on third base.
Yeah, let's be honest. I mean, listen, played my cards well, but the deck I was given to start with was stacked in my favor.
Totally. So what are some commonly held myths about autism, and what are some things that you just really want to just disabuse people of immediately?
Thank you so much. The first and biggest one is one that, unfortunately, Simon Baron-Cohen, and I'm not going to say that SBC is to autism what SBF is to crypto, but there's a parallel to make.
SBF being
Sam Bankman-Fried.
Got it. Of course. Mm-hmm. Sorry. I've not just given him initials, but sure.
Oh, sorry. Crypto world. He's the one who came up with the extreme male brain theory and the lack of empathy theory, both of which are complete bollocks. The far better way of seeing it, it's not that autistic people lack empathy. It's more of a double empathy problem. Damien Melton, an autistic researcher, came up with that. It's a brilliant concept. It's that when two autistic people speak together, communication goes great. When two neurotypical people speak together, communication might well go great. But the real problem is that there's double misunderstanding issue. So it's not that the autistic person lacks empathy. Frankly, the neurotypical person lacks as much empathy. And if given the proper tools, communication, it can be fabulous and pretty hilarious also. It really is a question of tools, and it's a question of circumstance, and it's a question of environment, because another really useful concept for autistic people is spoons. We only have so many spoons during the day to handle neurotypical occurrences, worlds, peoples. And so you'll frequently hear autistic people say, I'm so sorry, but I just don't have enough spoons to handle that. And I've always found that a very adorable and very useful concept. There's some fantastic autistic art. I will look up the name of the particular person whose art is just bloody wonderful to explain autism to, well, the world in general, but kids in particular.
So let's go into your marriage for a second. You're married to a neurotypical man. And what are some of the things that you needed to learn? What are some of the things that he needed to learn so that you could cross-culturally communicate well?
Okay, this is the best one. So my husband is a sweet boy from Nebraska, so Midwest, and I'm autistic. So the first problem is precision of language. So in a small way, for example, if he uses the wrong word, I'm going to be stuck on it until we agree that it was the wrong word, get the right word, and only then can we move on. So if he says toast instead of bread, I'm like, but you said toast. And we can get on the next sentence, because precision of language, which drives him absolutely crazy. But in a more serious vein, for example, 4 or 5 years ago, I decided that I was going to fire all my clients, which I have a tendency to do, and take a year off pro bono. That would have been fine, but I 1 year turned into 4. And entirely my fault, let me be clear. I did not change my lifestyle and my spending habits from when I used to work with billionaires. So after a couple of years, I got my family into such a financial hole that we had to actually sell the Silicon Valley property and move up north. But the linchpin of this was that Brian was convinced that he had been telling me the whole time that I was running us out of money. Because when I suggest acquiring something, he would say, can we afford this? Which apparently for any Midwesterner is absolutely obvious. We cannot afford this. Whereas for me, precision of language. So it took us 6 months till I finally realized. And the minute the misunderstanding was cleared up, my spending habits changed right off the bat. And I've gone right back to working with billionaires. So we're in a fantastic financial situation now. We're great. As you know, we bought a farm, etc. But who knows how much longer it could have gone and how much worse our situation would have been through genuinely a pure misunderstanding, cross-cultural communication.
And what you really needed to hear in that moment was, honey, we cannot afford this.
That's all I needed to hear. That simple.
Got it. And what would be some of your recommendations to people who are in a similar cross-cultural marriage? Because I think that together you're probably way more powerful playing these different amazing instruments.
It's the same as with my co-author, Judah Pollack, who is not autistic. The one thing that both my husband and I and my partner and I have been very good at is recognizing strengths and weaknesses. And Lord knows my strengths are fairly few. They're very strong.
They're pretty damn strong, Olivia. Come on, let's be real.
Yeah, but they're very narrow.
They work for me.
They're specialized. And so I'm not, just an example, I'm not one of the people who will tell you, apparently 100% of people are convinced that they're above average drivers, which is impossible. That's not me. Listen, for the safety of all concerned, I keep myself off the roads.
Right.
I am a terrible driver, as are many autistic people. Now, one theory, fascinating one, is there is a theory that autistic people take in, on average, 60% more information than neurotypical people. It's one of the reasons that we can go into autistic meltdowns so often. It's just because we are assaulted with all the information we're taking in. I honestly think I'm just crap at dealing with the physical world, let's be honest. But I'm also in this incredibly privileged position where I can live as a recluse on a farm well away from the world. And I leave the house once a month and my husband does all the driving. There's, again, back to privilege. There's a reason that I can work this way, whereas the levels of unemployment amongst autistic adults are well above 85%. It's systemic. Really, the system is fucked. And I should know because I'm at the highest levels of it. Sadly, let me be clear. No matter what you call my work, no matter how well-intentioned I am, in the end, I help people who are already quite rich and powerful become even more so. So I'm not changing the system. I'm reinforcing it. And that's something I have to be honest with myself and everyone else.
So you just dropped something huge. 85% of the autistic community is unemployed. And one of the things that Temple Grandin said during our interview is that had there been a person who was on the autism spectrum who had the visual strengths that she had when they were trying to create the space shuttle Columbia, the explosion would not have happened because it would have been identified immediately. And I'm just thinking about this is really at the peril of corporate America and everyone. So let's talk not even to the expenses of the 85% who aren't being employed, but how does this actually cost the world the deprivation of genius?
Let me flip it around. Okay. I think the most effective argument that we could have for employers is you are losing out on a competitive advantage. And if you look at the smartest people in the room, SAP, for example, Intel is another example. Those companies have specific neurodivergent recruiting programs because they know these advantages. The Army is starting to look into it, the US Army at least, is starting to look into this more for the same reason.
Good.
It's not just the standard pattern recognition, which, we're a lot better at than most people. Of course, we think outside the box because we can't even see the damn box. Actually, that's what has been a problem for us most of our life. But beyond that, the extraordinary competitive advantage that any team that knows how to make the most out of its neuroatypical people will get is something that if you play it well, no one else can catch up to. So be smart and don't overlook these extraordinarily undervalued assets.
So you're talking to a chief people officer, imaginary, and you say, listen, here are a few of the things you need to keep in mind in order to make sure or to increase the likelihood of our non-neurotypicals, namely the autistic community, to thrive at this work environment? What are your top tips?
Okay, I'm not going to answer that because I'm going to put you in touch with someone who is the expert, Ludmila Press. I'm not going to pronounce her last name well, so I'm going to put you in touch with her. She is wonderful. She's the one who writes the articles in the HBR, Fast Company, you name it, on exactly that question. The reason I can't answer that is because I've never actually been in those environments myself. I've been insanely lucky that all my working life, I've been on the outside of companies, not the inside, because my skills happen to, at the moment, be highly valued by people who, at the moment, have all the money and the power. Got it.
So, listeners, there's a good chance that we will be hearing from Ludmila at some point. Let's go into your former book just for a moment, because I know we're not going to spend very much time there. But as a person in the autistic community who created a book on the skills associated with actually becoming more charismatic, maybe this was a research that you had unwittingly taken on for yourself. I'm wondering about the genesis.
Unwittingly. It was a hyper-death situation.
Wittingly.
Yeah. Listen, by cheating, it was clear to me that either I exile myself to desert island or I learn how to make this whole human thing work. And so I've chosen the human thing for the moment, but believe me, keeping the desert. Actually, I am kind of on a desert island right now. Right. Anyway, no, it was completely wittingly. This was desperation. Humans to me have always been alien species. They made it very clear to me growing up that I was an alien species to them. And so I had to look at them through a not just anthropological, but truly zoological lens. And so the reason that I can explain charisma when, for example, Bill Clinton can't, is that a natural person can't tell you how they do that thing they do, whereas I can tell you this quirk of that eyebrow is going to have this effect on the human psyche because it's my job.
Absolutely fantastic. And from learning those lessons about how to rock power, warmth, and presence and other things that you describe about how Norma Jean becomes the magical Marilyn Monroe on the subway from plain Jane to goddess in the matter of seconds. Let's hear about some of the times that you actually rocked that skill as an alien in this world of people walking around with these human suits.
So you're talking about the times I forgot to turn it off.
Some times that you actually applied the skills from the charisma myth, and what did they do for you? Did they feel somewhat alien to you? Did they feel like they actually became you? Were they helpful to you?
I mean, I started when I was 18, so that's a fairly long span. These days, I keep the charisma turned off because of the side effects. Cannot handle any more friends. Mm-hmm. So I'm serious. Yeah. Listen, okay, to any autistic listening, it's going to make complete sense.
It does to me as well already.
Hang on. Going. First, I decided that I had to figure this whole professional stuff out because at least that was more understandable than the whole social mess. So I figured out the professional stuff and fine, I got that settled. And at age 25, I was financially successful enough that I had my first burnout. Yay! Then I decided I need to figure out this whole friendship thing. And then I ended up with, well, more friends than I can handle. Fine. Then I decided, okay, it's time to apply this autistic mindset to dating. And I ended up with a harem. Then my husband showed up and I had to fire the harem. But the point is that step by step, I looked at different areas of my life from an autistic perspective. And so charisma was simply the application of an autistic perspective to a particular realm of human existence. That's it. I just took it apart and looked at it, figured out how to work, put it back together. And then when Penguin asked, put it together and shoved it out through the world and said, here you are, go away. Thanks. Bye.
Except for the fact that's not the end of the story. During the tour, it was such an assault of stimulation that you just were melting.
Oh, I had a couple of meltdowns during the publicity tour, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So I wasn't aware that I was autistic at the time, so I didn't know how to protect myself from meltdowns. But yes, so during the period when I was turning the charisma on all the time, I do talk about this once in the book, just the most hilarious example. But when I was once coming out of the gym, sweaty, tired, walk up to the sandwich counter, realized I forgot to turn it off when the girl takes one look at me and says, oh my God, I want to find out how you became as wonderful as you are. And what I had said was, hello, can I please have this sandwich? Which tells you everything you need to know about charisma. It really is not in the words. It is almost entirely a body language question. But so it can absolutely become second nature. It is, however, expensive in terms of spoons for the autistics and simply energy for the others. And so there's a reason that even people who are naturally charismatic their family, their spouses will often tell you that they can see when they turn it on and they usually don't turn it on at home. When people talk about the downsides of charisma, they usually think about Hitler and the downsides for people around the charismatic person. I don't need to talk about that. It's obvious. what people forget is the downsides of charisma for the charismatic person themselves. And they're not obvious because it's not just you ruin any brainstorming session you walk into because you become more persuasive than you should. And so your ideas will win out not on their merit, but on your charisma. That's just one of the issues. Another one is that without wanting to, when you get into a deep conversation, kind of create a cocoon of safety, as if you were a therapist, I guess. And then people tell you way more than they meant to. And then the next morning they have the ego backlash and can get pretty ugly. There's a string of these. There's a reason I keep it turned off.
There are so many angles to this as you're describing it. I mean, so many dimensions. I mean, there's the fact that part of the genesis was you needed some basic toolkit to survive in this world. And then as somebody who had the autistic advantage of seeing the truth for what it was, you saw, oh my gosh, there's actually a negative downside to this. And certainly, while it may be good for some people, it's certainly not for me.
There's only so many humans I can handle in my life, and I am so over my head already.
That is, and so what is the agreement that you and your husband have with regard to social needs? I don't know what his are, but does he want to have more people over than you're comfortable with?
I don't know, because no one gets to come visit.
Because you lived so far away.
And it's official that no one gets to come visit.
Oh, so it's explicit.
Well, I mean, I think 2 friends have been allowed to come up. Let me put it this way. One of the happiest times of my life was in my late 20s when my circle of friends, who I adore, was so well trained that at 9 p.m., I had parties at my house pretty often, but at 9 p.m. at one point, one of them looked up the clock and said, oh, it's 9 p.m. We need to kick ourselves out. And the darlings, they not only kicked themselves out, but they did the cleaning up as well.
Oh.
At which point I said, I'm done. That's all the friends I need in my life.
So,
yeah, I guess boundaries and healthy selfishness in my case.
Yeah, self-preservation. And that's been really useful. Let's talk a little bit about one of your favorite, perhaps mildly humorous, if not humorous itself, stories of success that you've heard about people being disabused, perhaps, of like, this person's not disinterested, they're just autistic and they're actually awesome and they could be my dear friend or something like that. Some type of surprise, not just an autistic advantage, but an autistic surprise that maybe you've been exposed to.
I probably won't be the best person to have those conversations simply because the conversations I have with other humans at this point are usually in the work realm. And at this point, I don't have good words to explain it, but these days, what happens is that I'll sit down with whatever human it is, and then it feels to me like I go inside their head. Technically, I assume I'm running a simulation of their head inside in their world inside mine. And then I tell them everything that's in there. And then they say, oh my God, how do you know all that? And I'm like, it's fucking obvious. I don't say it that way. And then they're all shaken up and then I leave. And that's my usual interactions these days. So I was always surprised, but it's not necessarily the normal surprise.
Right. It's just that to you, something that is so readily obvious might not be even remotely discovered in 2 or 3 lifetimes by a neurotypical. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
And then they say, how do you see that? I'm like, if you see the color red, how do you know it's red? It's fucking red. I don't have good words to explain just how fucking obvious it all is. And so anyway, so the real problem I have these days when I go into a client company is that the client gets excited. They like the dog and pony show and all the fireworks of when I go inside a human head and say everything I see there. And then the person goes, ah! Yeah. Anyway. And so putting my foot down on that is actually something I have to do with my newest client right now. And I'm not very good at it because it's really attractive to delve into a new universe like we were talking about. I see these little universes walking around me. I'm like, ooh, new universe. I want to dive in and look what's in. And I have to really hold back.
Can you give me an example of one of the,
yeah.
I know that you're a huge fan of other realities such as Asimov's. You could school the so-called most ardent fan, but what are some universes that are attractive to you?
Other humans or
you just, sure. What, as you're describing them, the word universe, you're saying like,
well, every human mind is its own little universe that I get to look at in its own little world. But the universe inside my head is so much more real to me than the physical world outside. Okay, here's an example of how it works in our marriage. And this apparently every other autistic person I've spoken to has the same problem if they have a neurotypical partner, where we've just taken a decision, whatever it is. And 5 minutes later, my husband's still talking about it. I'm like, we made the decision. In my head, all the dominoes have already cascaded. All the ramifications are already clear. Why are we still talking about this? Or something has happened and it takes him like 2 days for it to sink into him. Whereas for me, 5 minutes ago, I don't care if it's already happened in the real world. It's already happened in my head. Or sometimes when we talk about visiting somewhere and then I forget that we haven't visited it because in my head, that's already been done. So it can play out in some interesting ways, I guess.
I love that. And one of the things that you said offline, and I'm just going to share if you're comfortable with it, is that you should not enjoy watching Inception because already that is so much.
No one was paying me. No, I'm serious.
I know I can't, but I have to laugh because that is just such a surprising response and it makes so much sense.
It's work. I mean, that's literally going into other people's head. It's what I do for a living. I already try to stop myself from doing it on a daily basis. Why would I pay to go to the movies to do work?
For sure. One of the things that we didn't touch on is what was the precedent? How did you decide to even be evaluated to find out, am I autistic?
My mother took me to the French psychiatrist. I don't have the English word. I think it would have been called a child psychiatrist at the time.
During your childhood, perhaps an analyst, who knows?
Yeah. And it was a classic, what is called today PDA, persistent demand avoidance, which some parents are now calling it persistent drive for autonomy. But it's the classic thing of insisting on wearing sandals in the snow or whatever else I was doing at the time. And that apparently, it turns out, is one of the classic symptoms. But at the time, in her defense, girls were not supposed to be able to be autistic. We were still at the stage 40 years ago when it was a white boy problem specifically. And so they essentially gave her a diagnosis while telling her that I couldn't possibly be autistic because I was a girl.
And one of the things that you took great pride in sharing with me is that in your future episodes of your podcast, which I've listened to and loved, it will include people who are not white and male, that you've made a real point to interview. Can you give me some of the demographics of some of the people who you're interviewing? And
they're anything except straight white men in STEM. So when you say autism to most people who are outside the neurodivergent worlds, they think either Elon Musk or Rain Man, and neither of these are actually representative. So on our episodes, we try to showcase, and the goal of this podcast is really to show how you can succeed being autistic without having gone through autism conversion therapy in the neurotypical world just fine. Thank you very much. Of course, there are struggles, but you don't have to be put through autism conversion therapy to succeed. So we've got journalists, people in tech who are Black women, who are gay men, who are everything you want. And none of them have gone through ABA.
Let's talk about autism conversion therapy. What is it?
So applied behavior analysis, who's the founding father of which is considered to be Olivier Lovas, is someone who was connected, albeit not for long, with the gay conversion therapy. And one of his most famous expressions was that autistic children, they look like people, but there isn't really a person there, just the impression of a human being. And it was very clear from the get-go, as far as he was concerned, that the goal of ABA was to make autistic children to be indistinguishable from their neurotypical peers. Now, again, to be clear, from a privilege perspective, I've never had to fear for my life because of the color of my skin. If I'm given an order by an American police officer and I don't comply, the risks of me being shot are relatively low. So in my case, ABA would not have been necessary as a life-saving practice. In some cases, applied behavior analysis can be life-changing and in some cases life-saving. However, unfortunately, 1 in 36 children in the United States these days is being diagnosed as autistic. Not surprisingly, there is a proliferation of ABA centers, treatment centers, and the single largest investor in ABA today is private equity. As a result, of course, the main goal of ABA centers is profit. Understandable. That's what PE is all about. And as a result of that, well, let me just put it this way, that deaths are not entirely uncommon. Now, to be clear,
deaths.
It gets much worse. So you may not know that electroshocks, it is completely legal to use electroshocks to punish autistic children and adults in the United States today. The Judge Rottenberg Center is simply the best known center where this happens. Now, ARC has only had 6 deaths of their inmates since they opened. Yay!
You say only 6.
That's how they phrase it.
That seems like 6 too many, but
you'd think ABA centers shouldn't be equated with the JRC because I doubt that many of them are allowed to use electroshocks on a 4-point restrainted spread-eagled child to be punished for speaking out of turn or being out of line. However, when the death
this is actually, this is like an aversion therapy where they are shocked and punished?
Yeah, the worst is that, of course, they want to induce the behavior first. So they force the child to do the behavior, then punish the behavior.
Wait, Olivia, are you telling me this is happening today?
Massachusetts, the Judge Rottenberg Center. Look it up on Wikipedia.
I am without speech.
Yeah, well, the reason I started the podcast is that I had sworn up and down, left and right, that I was taking time off from pro bono work. And then I learned about this and I was like, fuck it, I'm going in now. So in ABA centers and in the world in general, when autistic deaths happen, they tend to be the result of restraint. Kids being placed face down, restraint, they choke on their own vomit. So autistic deaths are unfortunately on the rise, A, because of restraint and seclusion, but B, because infanticide is not uncommon. And this is not a subject on which I can speak with any authority, but I would be happy to put you in touch with people. So there's some wonderful support networks, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, ASAN. There are a lot of survivors there who can tell you what it's like to go through it and to survive.
Okay, Olivia, I'm horrified. So let's just imagine for a second were given full reign and you could basically employ the teams, the resources to help our autistic members of society thrive and live their full lives. What are some of the things that you'd want? Obviously you can't create an exhaustive list, but what are some of the things that you would wish to put in place?
First thing would be the end of restraint and seclusion.
Of course, my God.
That is just
I as a psychologist, I can't actually believe that's, knowing that the research as I know it, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I'm ashamed to say, as an adopted Californian who loves her state, that those practices actually started in California, UCLA, believe it or not. But there is one wonderful book. There are many wonderful resources, but if you are autistic, if you have someone in your life who is autistic, the most practical, most wonderful book that I've read ever on this is called I Will Die on This Hill. And it is co-written wonderfully by an autistic person and an autistic parent. These are the two sides in the, unfortunately, fight that's happening between autistic adult self-advocates and the parents of autistic children. And those two are at war right now. And it is a tragedy because people who get hurt, of course, in this war are the kids. So I Will Die on This Hill, and they have many, many practical suggestions. To be clear, obviously, I can only speak from the perspective of a white autistic experience. I can't even say that I can speak from a white female autistic experience simply because in my entire life, my gender has never been held against me. This is just because of the privileged situation I come from. So the experience I have is a very narrow one. However, restraint and seclusion should be ended, period. No questions asked. That's it. That's where you start.
Well, Olivia, is there anything I should have asked but haven't asked yet?
No, it's been fun.
I'm so glad. Well, so I'm going to ask you, from your vantage point, I conclude with a ritualistic question. I always ask, if you had the magical powers to confer upon all humanity one insight or one skill that would dramatically help humankind, what would that skill or insight be? And how do you imagine it would affect individuals and perhaps society? What would that be? All
right. First of all, you're speaking to the wrong person because I fundamentally disagree with the choice of carbon-based life forms for a basis. And whoever decided that this was a good idea deserves an F, should be booted to the back of the class. So me and God have some serious consequences. But if you insist on it...
this is what we've got, to my knowledge, anyway.
I know. But man, we need to have some...
We have a lot of bugs in the hardware and software, but keep going.
For reals. I think that one of the most destructive aspects of many interactions is that people know how self-critical they are. They don't realize everyone else is as well. And what happens when you're in an interaction and someone beats themselves up, well, you know what it's like. If you've been in an interaction, you say something and your brain goes, "Ooh, that was stupid." And your brain, your face is going to it's going to wince, it's going to cringe. Your body language will indeed emit coldness, criticism, judgment. But the other person doesn't know that all that was self-directed. They're going to assume that you're feeling all that about them. And we then forget is that when you're in a conversation with someone and you see that kind of expression on their face, I promise you, because I'm inside so many heads, that in so many cases, if not most of the cases, they're beating themselves up. It's not about you, it's about them.
The contortion is self-deprecation, not externally driven.
Self-deprecation is a polite way of saying it. I'm afraid that in most cases, it's self-hatred, if not self-loathing outright.
Oh, Olivia.
Sorry.
So good.
So hang on, we're not done. So the prescription for this in the United States. So there's a difference between self-esteem, self-compassion, and self-confidence, right?
Yes.
Self-confidence, which is what we started, the shrine we started worshiping at in the US, is your belief in your ability to do something or your belief in your ability to learn how to do it. And quite a few of us insecure overachievers, we have a fairly high level of self-confidence. But self-confidence is different from self-esteem. Self-esteem is how much you like yourself. All too often, we have very high self-confidence and very low self-esteem. We know we can do quite a lot, but we don't necessarily like ourselves anymore for it. The real problem is that both self-confidence and self-esteem are, in technical terms, positively correlated with narcissism, which, as you would know, is not a good thing. It means it is closely, well, you'll explain it better than I, but more self-confidence, more chance of narcissism. The third aspect of this, self-compassion, is how you handle yourself when it's the fan or when things go wrong, to put it more mildly. And so self-compassion, if we're going to worship at any shrine, my God, that should be it. Because self-compassion is a predictor not only of our internal health, and we could talk at length about why this is. When you beat yourself up, it's your own immune system that you're shutting off. Why? Because your brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. Self-compassion predicts not just people's level of health, but also their ability to admit mistakes, their resiliency to overcome mistakes, so many things. Self-compassion should be taught in kindergarten. If you want to interview anyone on self-compassion, it should be Kristin Neff, who is the original researcher who has done so many wonderful things on that. And the other person I'd suggest on this is Tara Brach. Wonderful, wonderful teachers in both cases. So if there's one skill or discipline that I would beg to have taught to every human from birth, it would be self-compassion.
I couldn't agree more. I have actually interviewed Chris Germer, who is a very tight colleague to both of those individuals. And I hope someday to have Kristin Neff as well. I've actually attended one of her trainings. She's fabulous. And I think that this is probably the highest ranking skill of all the skills. Self-compassion, it seems to be correlated with all good outcomes, as opposed to self-esteem and self-confidence, which do have some troubling components as well as some good things. My goodness, Olivia, this was a total blast to be with you. I knew it would be, but just fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your wisdom with my listeners.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's great.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe